All right, Tyler, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you all for coming to this talk. We will be discussing the 5 common errors men make in dating and relationships with our speaker, Dr. Dan Alonzo. We are proud to host this talk on Zoom as part of our talk series, Conversations on Masculinity. And we do appreciate that everyone has shown up on our Zoom. Thank you.
So if anyone has never heard of MenCare, MenCare is a Strength United, UCS, and CSUN collaboration. We seek to reduce sexual violence on campus and beyond. We provide education, workshops, mentoring, and peer leadership training to promote healthy masculinity and reduce the rape culture.
All right. Now, before we begin, we do ask that you keep your microphone on mute unless you have a question to ask. You can also write a question on the chat box below. The presentation will be recorded, but we will just record the speaker screen. None of the participants will be recorded, but please be aware that your voice may be recorded. And if you have some concerns with that, please type in your question into the chat box and we'll ask the speaker on your behalf. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Tyler. So we're so grateful to have Dr. Dan Alonzo here for his talk, 5 Common Errors Men Make in Dating and Relationships. Dr. Dan Alonzo is a counselor at University Counseling Services here at CSUN, and he's given presentations for MenCare before, and in my experience, he has a huge heart, incredibly compassionate, and has so many good things to say. So I'm really honored that he's here. So thank you, Dan, for being here.
Hey, well, thank you, Rudy, very much. I really, really appreciate that very kind introduction. And I want to thank MenCare for setting up this series of conversations about men and masculinity. And I look forward to this. And I think Ureli and Tyler laid out what some of the guidelines will be in terms of if you have a question, you can send one through chat or you can alert us somehow. And then we'll make sure that we have plenty of time for questions at the end as well. So I'm going to go ahead and go into our PowerPoint presentation here. So hold on for just a second. And it should, oops, let me come back up here and okay. So everybody, again, thank you for being here. 5 common errors men make in dating and relationships. We men probably make more than 5, but I just wanted to kind of narrow down those to the ones that I tend to see most often in my work as a therapist. As Rudy said just a minute ago, I'm a staff counselor at University Counseling Services, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. So just a little bit more as a personal introduction. I do work as a staff psychologist at University Counseling Services, but in addition to being licensed as a psychologist, I've also been licensed as a relationship therapist for many, many years, probably more years than I would like to admit. But I have to say it's taught me a lot about relationships. Studying relationships has really helped me understand relationships as well. And over the years, I've worked with a lot of individuals as they've worked on dating and relationships, and I've worked with couples too as they've tried to sort out relationship issues. So I'm hoping that part of what I can think aloud with you about here, that it will, some of it will sort of bring up some questions for you. Maybe it will provide some insight. And again, we do welcome questions, and especially at the end, we'll leave plenty of time for that. Okay. So relationships can be tremendously rewarding. There's probably nothing like being in an intimate relationship with someone else. I can't think of another experience that we human beings can have that is more fulfilling and more gratifying than finding a relationship that satisfies us on so many levels. To have someone who truly, truly sees us for who we are And to get to know someone who for that person is, I mean, it's really a profound event when you start to think about it. To really make oneself vulnerable, to be open, to let people get to know you. I mean, I think that it's just hard to imagine anything that can be more fulfilling. They take work, which is what we'll talk about, but once the work pays off, it can be extremely rewarding. And at the same time, relationships can sometimes be stressful. You know, we do our best to minimize the stresses, but when, you know, everybody is different. And when we start to make a relationship with someone, that person is going to be different from us. You know, we wouldn't want to have a relationship with our twin. We want to be in a relationship with someone who's different from us so that we can learn about them and learn more about ourselves. But when we are in a relationship with someone who's different from us, of course, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be disagreement. There's going to be occasional distance. So that's what we have to learn to work with. And you know, sometimes relationships can just be plain difficult because that other person isn't always going to see things the way that you do. And because we're so used to thinking about things in our own frame of mind, because we're so used to thinking of things from our own particular worldview, it can mystify us and really frustrate us sometimes that the other person just doesn't get it, that the other person doesn't understand how we're feeling or what it is that we need from them. And so we can start to feel misunderstood. We can start to feel not seen. We can start to feel not heard. And so then we have to start putting through a lot of effort to try to get them to see the world the way we do. You know, and that's easier said than done. And sometimes relationships can be absolutely heartbreaking. You know, most of us, we do the very best that we can to treat our dating partners and our relationship partners with respect. We know that they're just trying to figure this all out at the same time that we are. Most of the time, we do a pretty good job at that. We try to avoid judgment. We try to extend a little grace to our partners. But every once in a while, that distance can just be heartbreaking. And when someone is feeling very hurt by something we've done, or when we feel really hurt by what we perceive that person has done to us, it's probably just the worst feeling in the world. When I started the presentation a few minutes ago, you know, I said that there's probably nothing more rewarding than relationships. But there can also be, it's hard to think of something that can be more difficult or more painful when a relationship goes off the rails and off the track. And how can we get it back on? That's what we want to think about today. So if we start with dating, you know, the truth is, I mean, dating sounds like a lot of fun, you know, and for those of us who are coupled, it can seem like, gee, I kind of miss those days of dating. But dating is tricky. Dating is not easy at all, you know, and you'll see on the screen some of the questions that we sometimes grapple with as we try to make our way through the dating world. You know, like, how do I find someone? You know, there isn't anyone particularly in my biology class I want to get to know better. And all these events my parents keep dragging me to, I'm not interested in anyone there to date. And, you know, I don't really drink very much. So even now I'm of age, I don't necessarily want to go stand around in a bar. And I'm not even sure I want to try the apps. So, you know, the question that I often hear as I'm working with individuals and couples is, how do I find someone? And once I think I do, how do I show an interest in another person? You know, how can I let them know that hey, you know, I think we could really have some fun. And I want to seem interested, but I don't want to seem too interested. I don't want to seem desperate because I know that that will be a turnoff. But I don't know where to draw that line. That's a very, very vague line. And it seems like they keep moving the line too. And so I'm never quite sure, when I can tell someone's interested in me and when they're not. And it's a little too scary sometimes to just come out and ask them. And then, of course, another question that I hear a lot is, what if I'm rejected? I mean, we often tell ourselves that there's nothing worse than that feeling of being rejected. When I was younger, I used to think of rejection as being similar to a conveyor belt with some product rolling down the conveyor belt, and that someone is there looking at the objects and the products on the conveyor belt and picking out those that are not going to make the grade and just quickly rejecting them and throwing them over their shoulder. Not this one, not this one. And so when we're out there in the dating world, it can seem like I'm making myself so vulnerable. I'm afraid I could be rejected if I ask someone if they might want to hang out. And then once I do start hanging out, how do I even know if I found the right person? And that takes a long time. So dating is tricky. And dating in the 21st century is even trickier because more and more we are relying on the internet, we are relying on technology, we are relying on apps so that we can connect to those that we think are out there. Of course, a lot of people are on the apps. Current research shows that most people do experiment with it in their single years currently. And that's great. It can be a lot of fun, but it can also be very addictive. And it's hard to put the phone down. Has someone liked me? How do I feel about someone? Swiping right, or am I going to swipe left? It can be extremely time consuming as you're trying to make your way through all of that. Current research shows, and this is changing, that now it's almost 50-50. 50% of people find their boyfriends, girlfriends, and partners through other friends or through social events. But nowadays, research shows 50% of people are finding others to connect with on apps. So we live in a changing world, and apps just seem to be a part of where we are. But there are, of course, drawbacks to apps because we always wonder, is there something better out there? Did I settle too soon? I mean, I really, really, really like this person, but I don't know. And so, we try to tell ourselves not to think about it, not to worry about it. We put our phones down, and we just try to go on with our lives. But then we keep thinking, what if I'm missing something? What if the person that's really going to be a good match for me is online right now, and I'm here trying to ignore my phone? And so back we go to the phone, back we go to the app, and then more time is consumed. So it's a troublesome dynamic that it's hard to figure out the solution to, because we want to meet people in a big pool, but we have to know when it's time to focus on what's right in front of us. And then when we get to relationships are very, very challenging. I know I don't have to tell you that. First of all, nobody gives us a manual. Nobody tells us how to do this. When we learn to drive, we go to driver education, we go to a driving school, we have our parents drive us around in an empty parking lot, we practice, we have to study the California State Handbook of laws and rules. We have to pass that driving test at the DMV. No one gives us a manual on how to conduct a relationship. Ideally, our parents or guardians may have taught us when we were growing up how to proceed in a relationship, how to weigh things out, you know, how to figure out who might be a good partner, how to be patient with that partner. But parents and guardians often have the same trouble in explaining relationships to us as they did explaining sex to us. One of my other roles, by the way, in addition to being a relationship therapist and a psychologist, is I'm also a certified sex therapist. And I do find that parents still struggle a little with talking about sex with their children, and they have trouble talking about relationships. And instead, parents sometimes have reactions toward the partners that their children are dating. Like, oh, you can find someone better than that. And that's stressful. And you know, to be honest, many of us may not have grown up with the best role models. You know, when you think about it, when we were growing up in our home, our parents, if we grew up in a two-parent household, they were the only model that we really had to look at, to watch day after day. Well, maybe we watched our grandparents, maybe we watched aunts and uncles, but, you know, sometimes our models, you know, they were stressed. They were dealing with life themselves. You know, so sometimes we can't always repeat or replicate what we saw our guardians and parents and aunts and uncles do. So when we get to our adult years, we kind of stumble our way through experimentation. You know, we just do the best we can to kind of figure it out in real time. But it's absurd when you think about it. We're expected to know how to do it as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Well, it's not. It's not natural. It really does take some thought. So therein lies the challenge. So by the way, before we get to the errors, many common errors that men make, I want to throw in this slide, that the purpose of this conversation is not to beat up on men. I promise you, because I really, really, truly believe that most men are doing a great job considering the challenges that are out there. And I truly believe that most men they're just trying to figure this out, just like everybody else. And we make mistakes because to be human is to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. I often tell couples in my office that there are no perfect relationships because there are no perfect people. We make mistakes, and it's just trying to figure out how we make our way back to them. One other thing maybe I can just briefly share about myself professionally is that at University Counseling Services, one of my roles is to be that of the liaison to the campus for men's issues and concerns. And so I work with a lot of men in University Counseling Services, and I really truly feel privileged to listen to their stories as they talk to me about a relationship that they're putting together and some of their experimentation with dating. And what I've observed is that, you know, the urge to merge, it's a great motivator. We have that in our blood. We want to connect with someone. But sometimes our desire to connect with someone, it clouds our judgment. That if we spent many years lonely or many years convinced that it's not going to work, that everybody else can find love but not me, then when we finally do meet someone who seems like a possibility, our judgment is clouded. You know, we start to get, we bring too much anxiety to it. We start to get a little bit desperate. We start to examine ourselves too closely, and we examine our partners too closely. And that's where we make mistakes. So I just want to throw that in, that I think we're all doing the best we can. But I think when we're out there dating and when we start to focus in on someone, that's where our anxiety comes in, and that's where we start to make mistakes. Now, just a few more slides before we get to those errors. I do believe, and research does back up, that men have different challenges in relationships than women. Now, I'm not saying in any way that men are better than women, or I'm not saying that men have it harder than women. I'm just saying that men have different challenges. Actually, the biological differences between men and women are very, very small. The differences in our brains are very small. Yes, there are a couple of differences here and there, and I won't go into them for this presentation. And yes, there may be some physical differences in terms of muscle mass and body size and so forth. But, the real differences are based on how men are raised, how we're disciplined when we're children, and how we're socialized by the adults in our household and socialized by the larger culture. I mean, I acknowledge genetics and biology do play a part. But overall, and this last bullet point is the thing that I really want you to carry with you as we go through this. Overall, people learn about relationships based on how they were treated when they were young, because our first relationships were with our families. Our first relationships were with our parents, with our aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents. That's how we learned about relationships, okay? So I think that that is really the bigger influence. So, how were men treated when they were young? Now, these are some big generalizations I'm about to show you, but let's consider them briefly if we can. Now, of course, it's going to vary, so it's not going to apply to everyone. But when men are boys growing up, boys in general, and research does back this up, boys are handled in a more physical way when they are young. They have shown through research that boy infants and boy toddlers are thrown up in the air and caught, of course, by their parents much, much more often than girl infants and toddlers. And boy toddlers are wrestled with and tumbled with a lot more by their caregivers than girls are. And as they start to move on into early childhood, boys are often played with, like, hey, let's go out and kick the soccer ball. Hey, you want to play catch? I'll race you to the lamppost. Whereas by and large, and again, this is a big generalization, girls are often talked to, engaged in conversation. Now, it is true that there are some biological differences, and that girls' and women's brains may have an advantage in terms of language acquisition and production. But even from an early age, girls engage in conversations much, much more often than boys are. And boys are more often engaged in something physical. And so boys are therefore taught to be active, athletic, competitive, and they're rewarded for that. Their behaviors are reinforced. And so slowly over time, ages 4, 5, 6, into kindergarten, into elementary school, they're reinforced for strength, independence, to be adventurous, to be successful, and by the time they get into high school, to be self-reliant. These are the things that got them attention, and these are the things for which they are rewarded. And so by the time a boy is a young man, 16, 17, 18, he's expected to be confident and in control, because those are the messages that he got when he was growing up. It's a great thing to be confident and in control. I mean, that's a wonderful thing. But we are human, and sometimes we have doubts, and sometimes we get scared, and sometimes we feel sad. And we have to be able to talk about that. So just a couple pictorial slides here. This is one of a young father playing with his young child. And again, research shows that fathers tend to do more rough and tumble play with their sons than they do their daughters. The daughters are at no more risk for being hurt or injured. But for some reason, parents, even in 2020, somehow assume that girls are more fragile. And that's not true. But what boys take away from this is that connection is physical, that in order to connect to someone, you have to be engaged in the physical way, not so much a conversational way. So there's a lot of physicality. Boys will be boys. Boys will tumble over one another. Boys will hit each other. Boys will playfully wrestle. You know, that's what boys do. Again, there's nothing bad about that. And please remember what I said a few slides ago. I'm not saying that many girls aren't raised this way too, and many girls are very physical, and they learn to be really connected to their bodies, and that's great. You know, what I'm saying is that still habits are hard to break, and for whatever reason, boy children are often treated differently. And once boys become men, there is still this sort of exuberance, boisterousness, competitiveness, showing each other how confident we are, active, celebratory. And it is a way, I think, that men are allowed to be intimate, for lack of a better word, connected to one another, feeling like they're a part of someone else and something else. It's a great feeling. And I love this picture to see all of these men having such a good time. Was there a question? I think, I thought I heard something. Okay, so just let me know, moving on. So when men enter relationships, keep in mind, they've learned the value of physicality, that is being physically present and making a connection with others. They want to be physical because it's what they've learned. Remember also, they've learned to solve problems and they've learned to be results-oriented. They've learned the importance of being right. And they've learned the value of being independent, confident, and in control. That's a lot of the message that they got. And this was modeled for them by the men in their lives when they were young. Now, I do acknowledge, and research shows that this is slowly changing. Believe me, the young fathers that I see today, the fathers who are in their 20s and 30s, are so much different than my dad. I mean, I know that I'm considerably older than many of those of you who are participating in this conversation. But, you know, my dad would not have had an extensive conversation with me. I was just expected to do what I was told to do. You know, I was expected to get out there, play physical sports, that type of thing. So things are changing with the generations. However, sometimes what we learned when we were young, this can lead to mistakes in relationships. And this is where we come to some of the most common errors that men make. So I've identified 5 common errors. And the first error, number 1, is that men rush. And in my office, I often say, what's the rush? You know, it almost seems like you're wanting to push this dating situation or this relationship. And I'm just curious what that's about. So men may tend to rush, which may come off to their partners as pressure. Remember that men may be yearning for physical closeness and connection and intimacy. So in dating and relationships, they may try to rush their partners to a level of commitment that, you know, the partner may be going slower than they are. And I have to acknowledge, you know, it's hard to tolerate ambiguity. It's hard to not know what, you know, where are we going? You know, are we getting more serious? Are we not? Are you attracted to me? Am I attracted to you? You know, it's really hard to tolerate the not knowing, because I think it's just in human nature, we want to know. So a lot of guys, they rush their partners, you know, to get rid of the suspense. It's almost as if they're still trying to solve a problem or accomplish a goal. The thing is, we have to remind ourselves, partners, they can't feel safe if they're being rushed. So somewhere we need to learn to tolerate that not knowing. We need to learn to tolerate that ambiguity so that our partners don't feel rushed. It's not an easy thing to do. I want to tell you, it's not easy. And rushing and pressuring happens in the sexual realm too. So that sometimes, because men may want to make it physical and that that's a connection for them, that they may sometimes push the sexual piece before the partner can be ready. So, I acknowledge sex is a way to feel closeness, tenderness, and vulnerability. And I really think it's important to remember that sex is sometimes the one place, maybe the only place in a guy's life where he can feel truly close and truly intimate with someone else, especially if he's never really learned to talk about his feelings or have conversations with people. Sex is a way that I can feel, that real intimacy. And so I know we hear a stereotype about men a lot, that all men have on their minds is one thing. All they want is sex. That's all they're out to get. But I'm suggesting a different framework by which to look at this. I think all men are trying to do, many men, is that they may feel pressure to make the relationship sexual because they're just trying to feel intimacy. They're just trying to feel that closeness. And I can understand that. They just have to remember that, but you can't go faster than your partner. And many men feel that they have to seal the deal before the partner wanders away. So in that case, the partner starts to feel invisible. Like, I feel like I have to give in to the pressure of this guy or I'm going to lose this guy. And we don't want anyone to be with us because they're afraid of losing us. We want someone to be with us because they really like us for who we are. So here's a correction for error number 1. Slow down and enjoy the journey. Take it slow. Take dating slow. Have fun. I mean, if it's not fun, what's the point? Learn to be in the moment. Try not to worry so much about, when are we going to get to this point and when are we going to get to that point? Try to just enjoy the person in front of you. Hold on to it, in a very mindful way. Just try to really savor how much fun that is. The more you do that, the dating and the relationship will grow stronger, because trust and love can only build when both partners feel free and safe. Once again, who wants to be in a relationship with someone who feels like I don't want, let me put it this way. I don't want to be in a relationship because I'm feeling pressured to do that. I want to be in a relationship because I know the person really likes me. Okay, error number 2. Men very often take their partners for granted. It's as if having succeeded and maybe found a boyfriend or a girlfriend, it's almost as if we relax. Yeah, okay, because that chase and finding someone and cruising the apps and getting introduced to a dozen people, that was confusing and stressful and tense. All right, now I've got a girlfriend. Now I've got a boyfriend, and it can feel good to say, I've made it. The problem is if you rest on your laurels, it's not going to work. Every garden needs tending. You can't just plant something and say, it's going to work from now on. You have to keep paying attention to it. Otherwise, it's really easy to become complacent. And then we start to think that everything will stay the same. And that's not true, because complacency leads to boredom, which is going to work against the relationship. So we have to keep injecting new life into the relationship. We have to keep paying attention to our partners. So a correction for error number 2 is just that. Keep paying attention. Stay in the moment. Keep reminding yourself what's really special about this person. And remind yourself that, You wouldn't want your partner to be ignoring you. You know, practice listening to your partner. Just really listen. I mean, I know it's so easy to, you know, the two of you are walking or riding a bike or, you know, just doing something fun. And because you're both doing the same thing, your partner becomes somewhat invisible. You really have to be very intentional, really listen and get to know your partner, even all over again. Ask them questions, bring in new activities, new ways of having fun. You know, we're all changing. So get to know your partner all over again. Couples who have been together a long time, like couples who have been together 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, what they often report is the person that I'm with now is not the person that I first got together with 30 years ago. I have had to keep learning all over again who they are. So it's really important that we don't get lazy. We have to keep paying attention to this other person. Yeah, we still need to make time for ourselves, and that's part of negotiation, but we can't take the person for granted. Okay, error number 3. Men tend to get defensive, or they pull away, they do the silent treatment, or they withdraw. Remember how men have been socialized, what I mentioned earlier on. Men are socialized to be competent and in control and to be successful. So when the partner brings a complaint, it can feel like, oh my God, I've been caught. It can feel embarrassing and shameful because I'm always supposed to be, you know, at the top of my game. So a complaint can feel like criticism, and I can start to feel like I'm being criticized. And then the man may start to feel like he has failed. And if a man feels criticized, his first instinct is going to be to defend himself and say things like, well, I didn't do that. Or what about you? You did the same thing. Or why are you always picking on me that way? Why is that so important to you? You know, our first instinct is to get defensive when we think we're being criticized. And if we haven't really learned, you know, how to engage in reflective conversations, we may not have the emotional language to really discuss the complaint. And what a lot of men do is they actually withdraw. They go away mentally, or they shut down. We have really good research to back up my points on this slide. Some of you out there may even have heard about one of the premier researchers, John Gottman, who has spent more than 30 years studying couples and what works and what doesn't work. And what he has found is that men do tend to do this when they feel criticism coming toward them. They either get defensive or they do what he calls stonewalling. They get very blank. What's actually happening is that a man gets flooded with a whole bunch of emotions that he may not know how to sort out. And so because he's flooded, he gets very still and very calm. You may have heard that in heterosexual relationships, sometimes women and men are arguing and the guy gets very still and doesn't say anything. And the woman will say, are you listening to me? And the guy will say, yes, I'm listening to you. I heard everything you said. You said this and you said that and you said this and you said that. It's almost like they're a tape recorder, but they're still withdrawn and they're not engaging emotionally. So we need to correct that. So the correction to error number 3, hang in there. Don't get defensive and don't go away. All we have to do is just listen. That's all you have to do for a first step, and let your partner know, okay, I'm listening. I'm trying to understand. And it is okay to say, I hear you. Can I have some time to think about this? You know, like, I'm really confused right now, and a part of me wants to, you know, like shut down, but I don't want to do that. Can you just give me some time to think about what you've said? You know, that's all we have to say. If we can just say things like, I'm still here. I'm glad you told me, rather than keeping it all inside. Now, of course, it gets to be the guy's turn too. you know, and then when it's the guy's turn, you know, he can say something along the lines of, well, this is how I see it from my point of view. And this is what's going on with me. It was not my intention to hurt you. And I'm sorry if I did something that hurt you. But I think the main point here is we need to listen, try our best not to get defensive. And I tell you, I really get it. I know I've been there myself. It's really hard. You know, just try to hang in there, not get defensive, and don't shut down. Okay, error number 4. Men become suspicious. Jealousy is a natural feeling. We're all human, you know, and we're all going to feel jealous now and then. And there's nothing wrong with that. Feelings are just feelings. It's what we do with them that counts. And then men start to worry, however, that partners are going to leave. And then if that jealousy stays around for a long time, it comes from a sense of inadequacy. We start to feel like, I must not be good enough. My partner must be getting tired of me. They must be getting bored. They found someone more attractive. And remember, men are raised not to feel inadequate. We're not supposed to feel inadequate. We're always supposed to be in control. So if we feel inadequate, that tends to bring up some panic within us. And suspicion, when we start to get suspicion that the very special person in our lives is looking around and looking at someone else, that begins to tear away at the fabric of our relationship. So the correction to error number 4, work on yourself. Really try to feel better about yourself. And if there's something going on, you know, be honest with your partner, but do it in a respectful way. So try to figure out where your worry is coming from. If this is a pattern of yours, if you tend to do this with your dates or with your significant others, tend to be really suspicious, you know, it's a signal to you that you really got to work on your self-esteem and feel better about yourself. Now, if you are getting suspicious, it's better to be honest and not sneaky. You know how much you would resent it if someone were going through your phone or your email. So don't be sneaky. Just try to own up to it, but still be honest about your feelings. So say things like, I start to get worried about you and this guy you were talking to. I guess I get jealous. I start to worry that we are not okay. Do you hear how the person is admitting that they have a feeling and an emotion? But they're not blaming the other person. They're just saying, I get worried. And then when your partner reassures you, this is the tough part, you got to practice believing it and letting it go. Because as a wise person once said, the only way to learn to trust is to trust someone. The only way you're going to build that muscle is to exercise it. Now, I do want to say that when I make these kinds of presentations or talk to people about this, the thing that immediately comes up is, yeah, but what if she is talking to someone else? Or what if she is playing on the side? I think all you can do is, of course, be attentive, keep your eyes open. And if you continue to see evidence, not hunt for it, not be sneaky, but then you tell the person, you know, I have to tell you, I'm not feeling good in this relationship. I'm worried, and I don't like feeling worried all the time. So it's a muscle we need to keep exercising. And the final error, men resist repairing. It's hard for us to repair sometimes. Repairs really are important. A repair is an attempt to get the relationship back on track. And it's hard for men to repair because remember, we were raised to be in control and to be right. And so sometimes it's difficult to say, I'm sorry, or you're right, or I promise I'll work on that. Because repairing can seem like somehow we're giving in, and it can seem like a sign of weakness, or like letting the other person get their way. And remember, when we were boys, we were raised not to show weakness. And I have personal experience with this. My dad never wanted to see weakness in me. He never wanted to see me cry. So I sort of grew up thinking I had to be in control and be right. So when I got to adult relationships, I had to learn how to repair. So the correction, remind yourself that a repair is not a sign of weakness, and that to repair is to move towards someone. You're not turning away from them. And to repair is to make a good faith effort to get back to the good stuff. And there are lots of different ways you can do it without letting go of your integrity. You can say things like, I'm sorry about the way this went down, or I'm really sorry about my part in this. See, you're not taking full responsibility. You're saying, I'm sorry about my part in this. I want to work on this because this relationship means a lot to me. Or I care about you and I'm committed to working on this. That will mean a great deal to your partner. So what are the 6 takeaways? What are some things that you can take with you as we close this presentation? Let me sum them up pretty quickly here. The 6 takeaways, I think: don't rush. Take your time and enjoy the journey. Really, really get to know yourself. Dating and relationships are a way to get to know yourself better. Believe in yourself. You're great. You're good. You're human, but there's a lot to celebrate. So believe in yourself and build your self-confidence, but admit that you're human and that you're going to have feelings. Be honest with your partner. Tell them what's going on with you. Don't blame them, but tell them what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And talk about I. Try to use I more than you do the pronoun you. Rather than saying, you always do this and you always do that, and why are you always criticizing me? Please practice using the pronoun I. I care about you. I get worried when I see you talking to other guys. I feel sad when you want to spend more time with your friends than you do with me. Or at least that's the way it seems to me. So it's okay to have your feelings, but talk about I. And remember, the better you feel about yourself, the better your relationship will be in the long run. So I hope that something in this presentation has been helpful for you, something you can take with you. On this final slide, again, you'll see that I'm with University Counseling Services, and that is our phone number at University Counseling Services. We are open. We are ready for your calls, as they say. We want to be there for you as you sort out dating, relationships, and everything that's involved in that. And there is my email address. So, Rudy, I will stop sharing the screen and I'm going to pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. So we're going to open up this last 10 minutes of time for any questions. So feel free to either unmute yourself and ask a question or to type a question into the chat for Dan to answer. So any question for Dan, now's your chance to ask it.
They may still be typing.
Absolutely. Yeah, not to rush it. I know when I'm on Zoom calls, it takes me time to, it always takes me time to think of a question. And so if, raise a hand too if you're having trouble unmuting yourself.
I see one question, if I may read this aloud. How do you think the quarantine will affect relationships? I know, isn't this a fascinating question? And, you know, we just don't know yet. I think, first of all, people are already starting to call it the big interruption. You know, did you know the person that you were dating well enough to continue to see them during this time that we are practicing social distancing? Are we spending time with them, or are we increasing our risk for possibly contracting the virus and then passing it on? Should we be, you know, communicating, messaging people that we're interested in, but how frustrating, because I don't know if I don't know them well, am I really ready to get together with them now? I don't know if it's a good idea for me to get together with someone who's a stranger. I think it's really going to interrupt us and kind of get in the way of our flow. But I think it's too early to tell. I hope we don't despair. And as we begin to pull out of this and slowly ease restrictions, I hope that we can take steps back to, spending good quality time with people.
All right, so feel free to any more questions or even just a follow-up from that one, if you have one, to type it in the chat.
Let's see. How do you deal when trust has been broken? There's a one that's actually sort of I'm not going to read aloud the person's name, but I think it's a good question. Sometimes, I was talking about we learn how to trust by trusting others, but sometimes the other person does break our trust. And I know that it's very, very heartbreaking. When that happens, I think the best that we can do is not to be mean or abusive or snarky, but I think the best thing we can do is just to really put our feelings out there in a respectful way, and just, again, back to that pronoun I. I'm really hurt. I feel hurt. I guess I didn't think that something like this would happen. I admit I'm feeling really disappointed. I'm feeling really angry with you right now. I think it's perfectly okay to give those messages. And because if you have a history of being hurt before, if you've been hurt several times before, I know it gets harder to trust with each new relationship. And that's all the more reason why we need to take it slow and not rush. I hope that that's helpful.
Right, one question that came through, Dan, is how do you mediate to older couples who might be too stubborn to use these communication strategies?
Oh, yes, I know. I think the first thing I have to do when I'm talking with a couple that's been together a while, you said older couple. I didn't know if you meant older in years or they'd just been together a long time. Maybe it's both the same thing. But if a couple's been together a long time, the first thing I want to do is really get to know the couple first, hear all about their relationship and the years that they've spent together. I want to hear about what's working for them and what's worked for them in the past, and what continues to work in the present. And I just try to get as curious as I can. Just try to get as curious as I can and get to know the couple, and that maybe they'll start to trust me. Then once they know that I'm really interested in them, and I really, by the way, I really like people. I really just love listening to people. Then once they know that I'm really interested and I'm listening, then I think I have a little bit more wiggle room, and I can start to give them some tools to help them talk to each other more effectively. But I think that the quick answer is I first have to get to know them and show them that I'm interested.
Okay, we have time for one more question, so I'm going to read this one. That's okay, Dan.
Sure.
How do you express what you want from your partner in a healthy way?
Yeah, how do you express what you want from your partner in a healthy way? Yeah, what a great question. Thank you for submitting that. I think, again, it's to say things like, I would like, you know what I would like? I would like it if you could spend a little bit more of the weekend with me. I know you really are really close to your family, and that's great. It's one of the things I like about you. But you know what I would like? I would really like if we could spend a little bit more time, and I'm wondering if we could work that out. I'm wondering if we could do more of this. I really enjoy it, and I'd like both of us to give it a try. So I think if we can put forth like, this is what I would like, this is what I enjoy. I think I would feel better if I could see this happen. I think I would feel safer and more secure if I could observe you doing this. I think if we put it out that way, I think we have a better chance of success.
All right. Thank you, Dan. We're coming at time right now. So we're going to start to close. So Yoreli, if you could take us away from here.
Yeah, thank you everyone for attending this talk. Tomorrow we actually have our final speaker, Ashanti Branch. He'll be presenting from 3 to 4:30 tomorrow. He'll be giving a talk titled Unmasking New Ways of Manning Up. He's our featured speaker in our series, and if you can join us, I encourage you to do so. And also, just one last thing, we're posting a survey link to the chat, and we'll also be emailing it to you. So if you can fill it out for us, it's completely anonymous, but just so it can help us for like future planning. And then again, like our mission is to reduce sexual violence and promote healthy masculinity. So we're always taking new peer educators in MenCare. So if you're interested, you can reach out to Rudy. He's the one that emailed you about this talk. So you can just email him. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And we hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Yoreli. To add on to that, tomorrow is Denim Day, which is a day that people wear denim to bring awareness to sexual assault and rape. So Strength United is putting on a few events tomorrow, one on relationships and consent. We have also the Pride United Talk series tomorrow from 10:30 to noon. The CSUN Campus Care Advocates are giving a live a Denim Day question and answer. And then again, as Yoreli mentioned, the talk series with Ashanti Branch is 3 to 4 p.m. tomorrow. If you want to find out more information about those, go to CSUN's Strength United's Instagram. So if you go to Instagram and do Strength United, you'll find out more information there. So again, I want to thank Dan so much for making the time to share what he's learned through his years of practice. So very grateful, Dan. Thank you for being here and sharing your information. And thank you all for attending this. All right.
Thank you.
So goodbye, everyone. So glad you came.